أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ربي اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي الحمد لله رب العالمين ثم الصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا وحبيب إله العالمين أبي القاسم محمد
اللهم صل على محمد
وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين أما بعد فقد قال الله تعالى في كتابه المجيد بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل لا أسألكم عليه أجرا إلا المودة في القربى صدق الله العلي العظيم صلوات على محمد وعلى محمد. Your second salawat for love of Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. And your loudest salawat as condolences to the master of our time, Sahibul Asr wa Zaman. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Respected elders, brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Continuing our discussion around this verse that we began yesterday with the topic of discussing our fourth Imam, and continuing today with the discussion around the daughter of Rasulullah, we mentioned this ayah as it's the injunction from Allah, as a command to the people who accepted the religion of Islam, that while there's no compensation you can give to the Holy Prophet for the message that he's brought to you, we do ask, and Allah does command, that you have love and mawaddah for his near ones. And there is no debate about whether this daughter of Rasulullah was considered amongst those who are considered qurba or from the family of Rasulullah. Our discussion tonight around this personality is in 4 sections, where we talk about 1, the creation of Sayyidah Zahra and its uniqueness; 2, her role in the 3 parts of her life: her role as a daughter, her role as a wife, and her role as a mother, to see the lessons that were left in the example of Sayyidah Zahra for us to apply in our day-to-day lives, so that we may be those who have mawaddat for Sayyidah Zahra, that we apply it in our day-to-day life. This conversation that comes about the significance of Sayyidah Zahra and her personality, there are some debates that happen about this, that, for example, the age at which she passed away. The argument about why there is a debate at the age at which she passed away is to justify the explanation of her death. For example, amongst the various madhahib, there's a statement that she was maybe in her 30s or 40s and she was expecting her 4th child. And it's natural for a person of that age that difficulties happen and complications happen, and they pass away from these complications. However, what we say is that Sayyidah Zahra was only at the age of between 18 and 20 years when she was martyred. And we use the term martyred. The difference is to imply the fact that that's not a natural age for someone to just pass away. That's not an age that someone just leaves this world as an individual. There has to be some hadith, some event, some occurrence that is associated with the shahadat of that personality, with the leaving of that personality. And this becomes a point of contention amongst the schools of thought about the validity of this statement. If you notice, we have 3 sets of tariq for Fatimiyya. There are 3 times in the year where we commemorate and we gather and we have these majalis. And some communities, for example, they'll commemorate one or the other, but the happening that's occurring now is that we commemorate all 3 in our community. Many communities now, they make sure that all 3 dates they have majlis. The significance of this and the interest of this, of one of the contemporary thought processes behind this, is to say that the same way we made Karbala an event, we made Muharram an event, we made it a happening that people became curious and they asked the question, what causes these people to gather all together? What causes them to make such a big event out of this, that when they went into history and they looked and they learned and they read of their own books, not of our saying, they found that in reality there was a grandson of the Holy Prophet who was abused, and the people who abused him are the people that we were told to love. And then they learned that we can't deny in history that there was someone who did evil against the family of Rasulullah. In the same way, contemporarily, the interest that we have in making sure that this Fatimiyya continues, that these events continue, is to make this an event that people turn and they question. There was a daughter of Rasulullah, and all of these people say something about her. What does history say about her? That we begin and invite people to question, not by force, not by criticism, but by curiosity, that the love of this personality has moved us to such a level. And who was this person? This was not a normal person. We take a look and we see there are narrations from Aisha, the wife of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, where she says, I never saw anyone who was more like the Holy Prophet in his speech, in their walking, in their standing, in their sitting, than Fatima Zahra. She says there was no one greater in similarity to Rasulullah in their mannerism than this Fatima. She says, I saw one time when I was sitting with Rasulullah in the house that Sayyidah Fatima entered the house. Rasulullah stood up from his place, kissed his daughter and sat his daughter in his own seat. Aisha says, I became frustrated by this. I turned, Ya Rasulullah, Fatima is no longer a child. She's a grown woman. You are Rasulullah, the authority of Allah on this earth. Don't you exceed the bounds a little bit by taking Fatima and putting her in your seat? You are rahmatul lil alameen. But when Fatima comes in, even you stand up. She says, and this is in Ahl Sunnah, this is not my narration or our narration, this is narration from the Ahl Sunnah books, in which she says that Rasulullah turned to me and he said, when I went to Mi'raj, my brother Jibreel gave me an apple. When I ate from that apple and I came back to this earth, I met Khadija, and after that date, Fatima came into this world. Fatima, this is Aisha narrating about Sayyidah Zahra. Fatima is from the fruit of heaven. And that Rasulullah continued, he says, whenever I would miss heaven, whenever I would miss what I had experienced in Mi'raj, I would go and kiss the neck of Fatima. Fatima is from the garden of heaven and she reminds me of the scent of heaven whenever I smell her. Salawat ala Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. So Yani Sayyidah Zahra is somebody whose even her existence was not something that comes from the normal process of life of a normal human being. So the question comes, why did Allah make it a significant event that Sayyidah Zahra should be someone who is born from the fruit of heaven? When we talk about Rasulullah and Amir al-Mu'mineen, we say they were put into the backbone of Adam from the creation of Adam. There's even some debate when we talk about, for example, Allah gives the command that when I put life into this Adam, do sajda to Adam. That the sajda was not to Adam himself, was to the nur of Rasulullah that was in the backbone of Adam. So Amir al-Mu'mineen, their nur was in Adam from his creation and they came through all of humanity. But the nur of Sayyidah Zahra was something that was kept separate. And the question comes to, why was that necessary? Now, to understand this point, we're going to have a few different conversations. So if you're staying with me, we're the idea of a human being is a composite of two entities existing together at the same time. One is the body, is the physical form, and the other is the spirit. That when we look at a human being, he's not to say only a physical presence, he is also a spiritual presence, and both of these, one absent of the other, does not make a human being. There are other items that we see that exist in two different states simultaneously. For example, when I take water and I boil water, at the point of that boiling of that water, it's both steam and a liquid simultaneously. And we can't say that one is water and the other is not. They are both water. In the same way, a human being, we can't say the body is the human being and we can't say the spirit alone is the human being. When we bring these two items together, it makes one human being. And this begins an entire conversation around the spirit that we'll get to at some point in time. But briefly, what we find is both of these entities work upon one another. That the spirit has an impact to the physical body and the physical body has an impact to the spirit. There are certain spiritual conditions that manifest physically and other physical conditions that manifest spiritually. For example, when I am in a state of fear, A state of fear, khawf, is a spiritual condition. How? When I look at a human being, there can be different characteristics that that human being shows me to indicate he's in fear. For example, some people when they are in fear, they stop speaking. Other people, mashallah, they begin speaking. Some people, for example, in a state of fear, their body becomes cold, their face color changes. Other people, their face becomes dark red, and they become very hot and embarrassed, and they move in this process. Fear has a different series of physical manifestations that tells me my spirit has been impacted and my body is responding to it. The same way the body has certain manifestations. For example, when I become ill, when I go through, for example, God forbid, may Allah protect us all, from an amputation or from an accident, that physical activity has a spiritual impact that changes my behavior. That, for example, where we have the phantom limb effect, where someone loses a limb, or we have, for example, someone after an accident, a physical accident, they become afraid of driving a car. Someone who goes through, for example, a traumatic event, their personality changes after that. That's that physical occurrence that impacted the spiritual self. And within Islam, we believe that this is possible, that the physical entity can impact the spiritual and the spiritual can impact the physical. How? We have the narration of our Holy Prophet where he explains, he says that one who marries his daughter to a man who drinks alcohol has broken the relationship of the womb with his daughter. Now, alcohol is a physical entity. The consumption of alcohol is a physical activity. The relationship of the womb, silai raham of the womb, is a spiritual condition. Yet the physical impacts the spiritual. We see in other narrations where Rasulullah is explaining, he says, be careful, تُخَيِّرُ لِنُطْفِكُمْ, that be careful how you choose your spouse, because certainly the environment your spouse is raised in affects the child that is born. In another narration, he says, be careful of the flower that grows in manure. I said, what do you mean? He said, be careful of the beautiful woman whose family is corrupt. Because that family that is corrupt will affect your lineage and offspring. Meaning the physical characteristics of those people will affect how your children come out and what their condition is and what their spirituality is. The relationship between these two indicates to us why it was that Allah sent the nur of Sayyidah Zahra from heaven, that He wanted to be, for her to be tahira. He wanted to be the spring of purification. That she is the one who, after the separation of the nur of Nabuwat and Imamat, it would be rejoined through her in the offspring of the 11 Imams who would come afterwards. Therefore Allah wanted for this Sayyidah Fatima to be Hawra Insiya, that heavenly individual who is in a physical body. That one aspect of her would be completely pure, so that when it mixed with this worldly entity, it would bring purity and would not be affected by what was in the lineage of men prior to that. So we see that one of the superiorities of Sayyidah Zahra is how she is the unifier of the nur of Nabuwat and Imamat. That she takes the nur of Nabuwat from her father and joins with her husband Amir al-Mu'mineen, so that she is the spring through which all of the Ayyam come out in purity. Which is why we have the narration of our 8th Imam, Ali ibn Musa al-Radha alayhi salam. نحن حجة الله على الأرض وفاطمة حجة علينا. That we are the authority of Allah on this earth, and our mother Fatima is the authority over us. Because she is the spring of that purity that was the union of the nur of Nabuwat and Imamat through which all of the Ayyam came. Now, this aspect is to indicate to you that Sayyidah Zahra was not as a normal person. That her creation was something unique and different that had never been seen before in this earth. And this will become relevant at the end of our conversation. We'll reference back to this point. The next aspect that we want to take a look at is, what was the life of this personality? What are the lessons in the 3 phases of the life of this personality that we take and apply within our lives? Now, Sayyidah Zahra obviously is Sayyidah Zahra. Therefore, the examples are how we raise our daughters, how we deal with our wives, and how we raise our children. But the relevance of these points is not something that is unique, that only the women need to hear, but also the fathers. When we look at, for example, the period of life of Sayyidah Zahra, we see first her as a daughter, then as a wife, then as a mother. In her role as a daughter, we compare the role of the daughter and father relationship between that of Rasulullah and his daughter and our relationship with our daughters. When a man has a daughter, his daughter is the source of comfort for him, is a coolness to his eyes. The relationship between a father and daughter is one that he makes sure that her studies are there, she goes to school, she's educated. But more than that, a father has the desire to fulfill all of the desires of his daughter. He wants her to be happy. He wants her to be someone who is satisfied, that relationship between them is one that is of pleasure. Boys, on the other hand, you give them a smack upside the head and say, go do some work. Go mow the yard. Yeah. No, but that daughter, you would never speak to the way you do with your son, for example. Why? Because that relationship is one that a father has a desire that this is a delicate flower in my house and I want to make her happy. This is the typical relationship we have with our daughters. But the relationship Rasulullah had with his daughter was different to this, was more expansive and complete than this. Our goal is that we want to give our daughters the kind of experience and raise them in the same structure as the way Rasulullah raised his daughter. When we say, for example, we want my daughter to be like Fatima Zahra, how can our daughter be like Fatima Zahra if we did not raise her the way Fatima was raised? When we look at, for example, the relationship between Rasulullah and Sayyidah Zahra, we see rather than simply a relationship of pleasure, it's a partnership between these two personalities. It's musharaka, it's inclusive. How? When Rasulullah would come back from his journey, the first person he would visit, Fatima Zahra. The last person he would see when he left on a journey was Fatima Zahra. That no matter the condition, now remember there are journeys of Rasulullah where he went to war. He went to fight. Did he hide his daughter from that reality? No. When he came back and he was injured, at times when he would go for tabligh and they would injure him, and he came back, did he hide those injuries? No. He included Sayyidah Zahra in the process of dealing with society and made her aware of the realities of society so that she would be better prepared to enter into society as an individual. Nowadays what happens when we raise our daughters, we raise them as princesses. They are raised with every comfort and every luxury, and then the day that they get married is the day that the world turns upside down on them. That now all of a sudden, life is difficult. All of a sudden they have all these activities to be responsible for, and the purchasing of the goods for the house, and dealing with the responsibilities of the in-laws in society, and they've never prepared for it. They were raised in a comfort where every difficulty was kept away from them. They had no idea. And we thought we were doing our children a favor. It's not just the girls anymore, now even the boys. What we do is we hide them from the reality. You don't have to worry about this. Don't worry about these difficulties. It's okay. What we do is we limit that child, we limit that individual, that tomorrow when he goes into society, he's ill prepared. He doesn't know how to deal with the difficulties that come to him because he never saw them before. Rasulullah teaches the example with Sayyidah Zahra that he says, I included and made her my partner in my affairs so that she knew and she was well prepared. Tomorrow when she went into society as an adult, there was no situation that she was ill prepared for. That preparation was done through partnership, of being involved in the matters of the household and the environment. And look at the personality of Sayyidah Zahra, that Rasulullah gives her the title Abiha. Abiha literally means mother of her father. He says, my daughter is like my mother because of the way she cares for me, the way she pays attention to me, the way she takes care of me when I come home injured and I am hurt. She takes care of me as a mother took care of her son, yet I am her father. That aspect of musharaka, that aspect of being a partner in the events of the family and the lifestyle and the home environment, allowed for Sayyidah Zahra to be such a personality that she was given the laqab, the title of Abiha. Imagine, Sayyidah Khadija was a great wife to Rasulullah, but she never earned the title that she was as if the mother of Rasulullah. Meaning that what Sayyidah Zahra accomplished by being a partner was a status that was unique to her. The same way our goal, when we want our daughters to be like Fatima, when we want our children to be like the Ahlul Bayt, the aspect of their upbringing begins from the part that we make them partners in our reality, to prepare them when they go out into society. They're an individual who has experience. They're an individual who is prepared and can learn from what my father and my mother went through, so that I can be a useful member of society. I can be a useful member to my new family that I've come. I am an equal in my marriage with my spouse, so that my opinion means something. It's not that I don't even know what the cost of food in the market is, because whenever I would say something, my father would bring it. It happens. We have this desire, but we do our children a disservice by not educating them about what the world is and how the environment is. It's not to say you kick them out of the door and say, okay, let's see what you do, come back later. No. The idea is that you begin to educate them of how the world operates before you send them out to be a part of society. And this is the example of Sayyidah Zahra. The next phase of her life that we see, if you're still with me, recite one salawat ala Muhammad, is the role of a wife. When we look at the contemporary understanding of marriage, we say the purpose of marriage is happiness. That success in marriage is an indication of happiness. Contemporarily, the two schools of thought of how do you judge if a marriage is happy, there are two aspects of it. One aspect of how is a happy marriage is, what can I do for my spouse? If my spouse is happy, then I'm happy. Right? The famous saying goes, happy wife, happy life. That this is an actual school of thought, that success in a marriage is happiness. My happiness is judged by how well I take care of my partner. If I take good care of my partner, then therefore my marriage is good and I've succeeded in the purpose of marriage. The other school of thought says we measure the success and happiness of a marriage by looking at how well my partnership with this individual allows me to fulfill my needs and desires. That through the aspect of marriage, if now my fiscal capabilities have increased, my ability to succeed and purchase the things that I desire, I've had a successful marriage. That material aspect, that am I a more fiscally capable, am I more materialistically adept at attaining what I desire, is that a result of the accomplishment of marriage? If I have, then I've selected a successful partner and my union with this individual is successful. And in this way, either one, I'm measuring how well my desires are fulfilled through my marriage, or two, how satisfied I can keep my partner indicates a successful marriage. Islam doesn't hold this opinion. In Islam, marriage is not about the completion of material wealth or material status and position. Why? When we take a look, for example, at the contract of marriage, there's no, first off, physical manifestation of marriage. For example, when I get married to someone, does something change? Does my body change? Do I get marked? Is it part of the process that, okay, we have to brand this individual that, okay, he's married now? It would make for a much more entertaining wedding ceremony. But that's not the case. There's no physical change when the process of marriage is completed. Yani that the whole purpose of marriage cannot be a material outcome. If the purpose of marriage was a material outcome, there should have been some material physical change. But there isn't. What that tells me is that the purpose of marriage is not associated with my material gain or success. Material happiness is not going to tell me, do I have a good marriage or not? In Islam, success in a marriage is known by, does that marriage help you fulfill your hadaf and purpose in life? Am I closer to my purpose in life by getting married? Now, one of the aspects, because there are some young people here, that you take a look at when you want to marry someone, is you take a look and you see that you want to find a good compatible partner. Do they share your purpose in life? If your purpose in life is material wealth, and you marry someone who wants to be an ascetic in life, you're going to have conflict. If your purpose in life, for example, is to be a politician, and your wife wants to stay away from society, you're going to have conflict in life. One of the ways that we determine a good partner is to see, do we share the same purpose in life? Do we have the same goal that we want to achieve with our life? For example, sometimes a person wants to have many children and their spouse doesn't want to have any children. The goal of this individual is, I want to have a big family, and the other person says, Baba, I don't want kids, they scare me. That's a conflict, and that's going to cause a difficulty in that purpose or in that marriage. Therefore, we take a look and we see, is the hadaf, is the goal, is the purpose of life shared between two individuals? When we find another person who shares our goal and purpose in life, then we can say that that will move towards a successful marriage. Now, a mu'min, their goal is always the pleasure of Allah. Their purpose is to live their life in the pleasure of Allah. So the hadaf of marriage in the case of Sayyidah Zahra was that marriage should be a vehicle that brings me closer to Allah. That through my marriage I should become someone who is a greater abida of Allah, a greater worshipper of Allah. So we take a look at 3 measures in the life of Sayyidah Zahra that teach us and show us, was she successful in accomplishing her purpose? 1, we take a look at the idea that material for her was not the goal, but rather a means to a conclusion. These days, for example, when we go looking for a suitable marriage partner, we take a look and we see that along with their profile and biodata, send me their bank statement. What career do they have? What did their father do? How much money do they make? And it's not just the girls who ask about the boys. No, the boys want the doctors as well too, and the pharmacists. And we look at the material process and we see, what can they give me? Will they give me a good life? And it's not just the children who worry about this, it's the parents too. When we look, for example, at potentials for our children, we want to see how much money do they make? What kind of career do they have? What is their value that they'll give my child? Will they give my child a secure future? Will they be someone who can earn well enough? But Sayyidah Zahra is teaching that for me and for her, that material gain was a tool to accomplish her goals. How? Take a look and see at her mahar. Her mahar was maybe 500 dirhams. In some narrations it's 480, others it's 500, which was a very minimal amount. Look at her house. Her house was something very basic. She had 2 pillows that were stuffed with the palm leaves. She had a simple carpet in her house. She had a simple water skin and a simple cup that was kept in the house. She had a simple wheel that was kept in the house for the turning of wheat. It was not something that she said that she needed the best that was available in society. And remember something, it's not that she was incapable of having the best. Her father was the leader of the Islamic empire. The best goods and products of that time either came from Yemen or from Sham. And her father controlled the entire empire between these 2 environments. You mean to tell me that if she wanted, Rasulullah could not have provided her with the best of goods that were available? No, it was completely possible. But that wasn't the goal or the purpose to have these items. These were simply just a means to accomplish the basic necessities of life. They describe and say that Sayyidah Zahra used to carry the water skin around her in such a way that she had a mark on her shoulder, that her hands had become coarse from the grinding of the wheat for the bread that they would eat, that her clothes would be dusty from the sweeping of the house. And that when Amir al-Mu'mineen saw her in this condition, he says, why don't you go to your father? Your father is giving out servants to serve in the houses of the families of the people. Why don't you go ask him for a servant for the house? She didn't already have one in the house. Rasulullah is giving them to other people. They are being spread in other houses, but not in the house of his daughter. Narrations write that Sayyidah Zahra went to see her father in the masjid. She saw he was busy with people. She became embarrassed that my father is helping all of these individuals and I've come to ask for my personal need. She left without asking him anything. That night, Rasulullah came to the house of Sayyidah Zahra. And he says, my daughter, you came to me but you did not ask. What did you want? She said, Ya Rasulullah, Father, I was wondering if there was any servant who was still available that may come help me in the house. Rasulullah says, Oh Fatima, shall I give you something better than having a servant in your house? She says, yes Rasulullah, please tell us. And I'll tell you if you recite 1 salawat ala Muhammad. So in case if anybody fell asleep while we were talking, they'll wake up from the salawat. He says, let me give to you something that is better than any servant that you could have in your house. Let me give to you that after you finish your prayers, recite your recite this tasbih. This tasbih that has become famously known as Tasbihat al-Zahra. That after prayers 34 times recite Allahu Akbar, 33 times Alhamdulillah, and 33 times Subhanallah. This tasbih known as Tasbihat al-Zahra is something that is known as the key for answering your desires. If you have a haja or a need, one of the ways that you fulfill it is by first utilizing this wasila of this tasbih. When we talk about, for example, taqibat as-salat and all of the mustahabbat and the nawafil that are associated with prayer, we sometimes get confused. What are the things that we should do? What are the best things to do? Where should we spend our time? Imam Ja'far as-Sadiq alayhi salam, he explains, he says, we teach our children to recite the tasbih of Sayyid al-Zahra the way you teach your children to pray. That there is no better action to prayer with your salat than this tasbih. That spending the time to recite this tasbih is the key that opens the door, that if you have a hajjah, you ask after this tasbih. That don't separate from your salah except by this tasbih. That Rasulullah gifts his daughter this tasbih in place of a servant in her house, and she is more pleased with it in such a way that till today it's known as the tasbih of Sayyidah Zahra. That this is that personality who didn't see material gains or material difficulties as something that were a hindrance to herself. Rather, it was just a wasila, a tool to be used to accomplish the goal in marriage. The second aspect that we take a look and we see that is one of the results of the successful marriage and relationship between two individuals is the partnership that existed between Amir al-Mu'mineen and Sayyidah Zahra. That they both took responsibility in the house and that they both shared the obligations of the house. That we notice, and famously the narration comes that after the marriage of Amir al-Mu'mineen, that they go to Rasulullah and they sit together and they said, Ya Rasulullah, how shall the two of us split the obligations of the house? And Rasulullah says, Oh Ali, you will handle the responsibilities outside of the house, and Zahra, you will handle the responsibilities inside the house. That the two worked for each other. It was not that in this way that some marriages work, that okay, everything is the woman's responsibility. I earn the income, the rest is your job. Nor is it in the way that some marriages contemporarily are, that each man is for themselves. I cook for myself, I buy the things that I like for myself, I keep for myself, and my husband or my wife does her own thing and she has her own things. I eat my things, she eats her things. Or that the man has no awareness what's going on in the house. He says, he comes in, he says, why isn't there food on the table? Didn't you go do the groceries? Didn't you get the items for the house? Didn't you make sure all this? No. There was a partnership between these two personalities, that they worked together, that there was consideration for one another. That Sayyidah Zahra took care of the affairs of Amir al-Mu'mineen, and Amir al-Mu'mineen took care of the affairs of Sayyidah Zahra. That they worked together, that there was an understanding between the two of them, that we help each other. Our goal is the same, we work together to accomplish it. That Amir al-Mu'mineen would bring the water, would take care of these affairs that involved getting out of the house, purchasing the groceries, taking care of these items. Sayyidah Zahra would keep the house clean, would cook the bread, would take care of these various affairs. That the two worked together. That it wasn't everything was one person's responsibility or nobody's responsibility. When you take a look and you see, for example, there is a conversation that Amir al-Mu'mineen comes home one day and he says, Ya Zahra, is there something to eat in the house? And she says, Oh Ali, there has not been any food in this house for 2 days. Had there been any food that I had for Hassan and Hussain, I would have given it to you first. One aspect is typically what happens in a marriage is once we have children, the children become raised on a pedestal. That everything revolves around the children. This statement of Sayyidah Zahra is teaching that no, above the children is the relationship between the husband and the wife. That takes precedence. That yes, children are important, but the relationship and the needs of each other take priority over the needs of the children. So she's showing how she prioritizes. Amir al-Mu'mineen says, Zahra, there's no food in the house for 2 days. Why didn't you tell me? She says, Oh Ali, I saw you busy with trials and difficulties. I did not want to add to your burdens. That this is consideration for one another. That Amir al-Mu'mineen wants to know, he's upset. I should have known that there was a need, I would have fulfilled it. And Sayyidah Zahra is saying, she says, I saw your condition where you were already in difficulty, I didn't want to add to your difficulties. That this is that partnership between the two individuals, that they care for one another and they pay attention to one another, which brings to the next phase that shows the success of a marriage is the respect for your partner and having respect for each other. And in this we see that Sayyidah Zahra in her final moments, she says, "Oh Ali, was there ever a time that you were upset with me, that I did not fulfill an obligation? Have you ever been upset with me? If so, forgive me, Ali." And Amir al-Mu'mineen replies, "Hasha lillah, may Allah forbid. How is it possible that I could be ever upset with you?" And Amir al-Mu'mineen himself says, Sayyidah Zahra was such a personality that I never forced her to do anything she didn't want, and I never upset her. That this aspect of mutual respect, that yes, both of these personalities went through great difficulties. They had many challenges in their life, but the precedent was always established of one of respect and mutual care and giving. If my goal is the satisfaction of Allah, how can I ask my Creator to be satisfied with me if I have not taken care of the creation that is tied to me? In the same way that a man has responsibility to a woman has responsibility to a man. And that how can we say we fulfilled our obligation to our Creator if our relationship with the creation is not valid? In this way, this is one of the ways that we test that if I want to please Allah, how is my relationship with my spouse? My spouse knows me better than anyone else. They see me when I'm sleeping, when I'm awake, when I have a good day, when I have a bad day. If this person is displeased with me and is not treated well, how can I imagine that Allah would be pleased with me? Sayyidah Zahra is teaching, if my purpose is my satisfaction with Allah, these are items that I need to accomplish with my spouse. Finally, in our third section, if you'll recite one salawat ala Muhammad. You aren't too tired because we finished, we can stop here if you want. In our third area, we see the role of Sayyidah Zahra as a mother. And there are three specific points of lessons that Sayyidah Zahra teaches in the role as a mother. And in these, the first one that we mention is the example where the famous narration states that Imam Hassan says that I woke up in the middle of the night, I saw my mother begin her prayers and I paid attention and I heard as she prayed all night, she mentioned each of our neighbors and prayed for all of them, but never prayed for herself. There are a few lessons here. The first one that we'll take from this is the environment of the house that a mother or a parent creates. Imagine for a child that when he wakes up or when he's in the company of his parents, they are associated with dua. The sounds in the house are of Quran. The dhikr is constant and going. The mention of Bismillah is something that is always constant. The environment of the house can either be like this, or in other instances we see that the child wakes up and the parents are on their phone, that the TV is on and running in the background, that children are being told to be quiet, shh, wait until I'm done watching this. Or wait, nowadays with games, right? Yeah, well, let me finish my game, then we'll talk. That the priority of the parent indicates what the culture of that household is. How is it possible for us to want our children to be pious individuals if the environment of the house doesn't reflect piety? If the environment of the house doesn't reflect the characteristics we want our children to be. Sometimes we say my child should be Hafiz Quran, my child should be Maulana, he's going to be Mujtahid, I want one of my children to be Mujtahid. Baba, you haven't opened a book in 30 years but your child needs to be a Mujtahid. How is that possible? If you don't create the environment in your house of one of piety that prioritizes that when Thursday night comes, we're in the masjid. When a majlis comes of shahadat or wiladat, we're in the masjid. That the association with these personalities is a significant part of my life. How can I expect it will be the part of my child's life? So when Imam Hassan gives this narration of what he saw his mother doing in his house, he wakes up, he sees his mother in prayer. He begins his day, his mother prioritizes salah. He begins his lifestyle and he's learning these mentions of Allah in his day-to-day life. That the environment in the house should be one that reflects the values you want your children to embody. If I want my son to be Ali, did I give him the Quran in my house? Did I give him the love of Ahlul Bayt in my house? I want my daughter to be Zainab. Did I give her the environment that's needed to create Zainab in the house? The second part that leans into this is the part of the importance and the priority of education, which we take a look again in a narration that's associated with our second Imam, that Amir al-Mu'mineen narrates. He says, when I would come home and revelation had come to Rasulullah, I would come to announce it to Sayyidah Zahra, and she would already know it. Amir al-Mu'mineen says, I am the first one who sits with Rasulullah. How is it when I get home, you already know the revelation that was sent? So one day Amir al-Mu'mineen comes home early. And when he comes home, he stands outside of the door. And inside there's a conversation happening between mother and son. Imam Hassan, what he would do is he would listen to the revelation. As soon as it would be completed, run home to recite it to his mother. So Amir al-Mu'mineen today, he comes home and inside he's listening to a conversation where Imam Hassan is repeating the verses of revelation that were revealed to Sayyidah Fatima. And in the middle of his speech, Imam Hassan stops. And Sayyidah Zahra says, my son, continue. You always remember the message that your grandfather brought. Tell me, what was the revelation of Allah to your grandfather? Now, there's 2 points. One is the promotion of education in the household. The importance of education, and the most important education in every household is the education of faith. Now, for example, a child who studies chemistry, studies organic chemistry or studies biology, today, this year it's important, the child himself will tell you the next year we never talk about that subject again. That's it, it's done. It was a subject I needed to cover, I studied it, I finished it, I left. I don't have an application associated with that subject anymore. The only subject that I can guarantee your child, inshallah, should have an association with from his beginning to his end is Islam. The education of Islam is something that will serve your child from his early phases until his very end of his life, because Islam is the meaning of that religion that teaches you a lifestyle, that teaches you what you need to do on a day-to-day basis, of how to interact with your society. Islam is associated with every aspect. There is a famous narration that talks about, I became a Muslim when I saw that in Islam there was even an instruction on with which foot to enter and exit the bathroom. That this is an important education, that we have to invest ourselves and our children's time in learning about Islam, because it will be relevant to every phase of their life. That this is part one, that Sayyidah Zahra is teaching the importance of the revelation of Allah and of the Quran to her son. The second is, look at the etiquette in which she's doing it. That when her son stopped reciting, she'd say, oh, bi'adab. Continue. Why did you stop? Don't you know this is... The positive reinforcement that's given in the process of educating your children. We want our children to love Islam. If we hit our children when they make a mistake, or we use harsh tones with them, they won't develop a love for Islam, they'll develop a fear of Islam. That I have to behave in a certain way, and if I don't, then people will yell at me, they'll abuse me. Even in our own community centers, we have, when our children make a mistake here, as opposed to criticizing or yelling at them, we have to change the tone. That we talk about in positive terms, that, hey, listen, I acknowledge some good things, but here's a mistake. Let's fix this mistake. Let's create that positive environment that Sayyidah Zahra is teaching. When she says to Imam Hassan, Ya bunayya, oh my son, continue. Kammil, complete the narration. Why did you stop? You always pay attention. Why? You always bring back the message. What happened? Why did you stop? He says, oh mother, I stopped out of fear of the one who is standing behind the door, that I may not disrespect his message. And he says, oh, father heard me. This is father's responsibility, that this is something that he does, that he repeats to us the message that comes from Rasulullah, not me. And out of respect for him, I should not speak and present something that is better his right to present. And Amir al-Mu'mineen comes in the house and he kisses his son, and he says, certainly Allah knows best where to place his nabuwah, to show that Imam Hassan was somebody who was impacted by the divine revelation, was the grandson of Rasulullah, and that's why he had this ability to not only recite the message, but to acknowledge it was his father behind the door, and out of respect for his father, he should stop. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. The third point we mention is creating that environment of giving. When we look in tariq and history, this is that family who was known as the generous ones, who were known as the giving ones. But that was not an attribute that began later in life. When we look and we see, there is the incident that's narrated that says when Imam Hassan and Imam Hussain became ill, they went to Rasulullah and they said to Rasulullah, these two children of yours have become sick. Rasulullah says, make another, keep an oath that should Allah restore their health, that you will fast for 3 days and inshallah Allah will give them health. And sure enough, Amir al-Mu'mineen and Sayyidah Zahra, they made this nadar, they made this oath that upon the completion of the health, they would fast. When the time came to fast, Imam Hassan and Imam Hussain said, we will fast with you. Fidda, who was the servant in the house, she said, I will fast as well. And these 5 personalities fasted. And the first day when they completed their fast, we see that a poor person came to their door and asked. And Amir al-Mu'mineen Sayyidah Zahra and the whole family gave away the bread that they had kept for opening their fast. They gave it away to this poor person. The second day, they fasted again. And the second day, what happens? An orphan comes to the door and asks for food, and all of them give their food away. And the third day, we see that a prisoner of war comes, and when he comes to the door, they give their food away. إنما يطعمون الطعام على حبه مسكينا ويتيما وأسيرا إنما نطعمكم لوجه الله لا نريد منكم جزاء ولا شكورا. These are the verses of the Quran revealed about this incident. The etiquette that a child who has fasted all day looks at the pleasure of Allah and helping someone in need more than he looks at his own hunger and his own desire is a characteristic that's taught in the house of being generous, of giving. That if you want your children to grow up into individuals who care about their community and their society, you begin that practice in the house. You teach them the importance of giving in your own house. That you begin this process early. That you teach them to give with their own hands. In the families in Najaf, in the old families, there was a practice in the time of Sayyid Muhsin al-Hakim. It's a narration of Sayyid Muhsin al-Hakim himself. That he says, one day I was sitting in my office, and the offices weren't like tables and desks and chairs. No, it would be a big room like this, and on one side the mujtahid would sit and the rest of the community would come and go, and they would sit and they would talk to him. He says, in this way I was sitting and people were coming and talking to me, and I saw a child who sat in the back of the room. And it seemed as if the child was embarrassed. It was maybe 8 or 9 years, something to this effect when the narrator told me. He says, maybe 8 or 9 years. Eventually, Sayyid Muhsin al-Hakim turns and he says, you come to me, what's your problem? The child comes and he says, Sayyidina, I have a problem. Muhsin says, Faddalu, what's your problem? He says, my father gave me some money yesterday. And today is the date that my family, we take out our khums. So I got some money yesterday and I have to take out some khums. Is that right? And Mujtahid says, yes, that's how it's done. So he says, what's the problem? He says, I'm embarrassed by the amount of the money. He says, I'm a child. He says, I have maybe, $2 that would be my share of khums. Mujtahid says, yes, that's your share. He says, I'm embarrassed by it. He says, why are you embarrassed? This is your responsibility and your right, and you're fulfilling your right. It's a beautiful thing. He says, what do I do with it? He says, you give it to me. So the child takes out the $2, the equivalent of $2, and hands it to the mujtahid. He says, thank you, I'm sorry I was embarrassed. He says, no, there's nothing to be embarrassed about. When the child leaves, the mujtahid, he says, I took that money, I kissed it, and I said, this is the purest money that I have ever received from the hands of a mu'min. That look at how that child is being educated by his parents on the necessity and the responsibility that khums is a financial obligation, that they would intentionally delay giving the child some amount of money so that it would be right before the date khums is due, and then that child would have to pay khums to teach the child that no matter what you get, if there's a financial obligation on you, you fulfill the obligation to make sure that you've taken care of it when the time comes. So that when the child grows older and he's in the habit that now, mashallah, he makes money, at that point in time, it's not difficult for him to give from his money. The same way Sayyidah Zahra is teaching in her own house. That when they gave theirs away, the children turned and said, we give ours away with you. You will be hungry after fasting, we will be hungry after fasting. You will give for the sake of Allah. La nuridu minkum jaza'an wala shakura. We don't want any reward from you people. We want the pleasure of Allah. We want to learn what the pleasure of Allah feels like as well too. That this is the characteristic that she's teaching in her household, that be generous people, be giving people. And this is that same personality who was known as Zahra, the angelic light, the nur of Zahra was such that Imam Hassan used to describe. He says that when my mother would stand in her place of prayer, her nur would enlighten the heavens the same way that we look at the heavens and are astounded by the stars. The malaika would be astounded by the nur of Zahra. And that's the question that remains, that at the end of her life, did this nur remain with her, or was it taken away from her? When we look at history, this personality used to complain to Rasulullah, Rasulullah, they have put such difficulty upon me that if they had put these trials on days, these days would have become nights. When we look and we see there are so many difficulties this personality dealt with that we can't begin to count them all. When we look in history, we see when Hajira was with Ismail and she was alone in the middle of Mecca, Allah sent for her Zamzam to quench their thirst. When Asiya was in difficulty with Musa that she had to put him in the river to send down the river, Allah gave her the comfort that Musa will be returned to you. When Maryam was expecting with Isa, Allah sent fruit and He gave the trees fruit that Maryam would have food to eat. But where was the mercy of Allah when Zahra was expecting with Muhsin? Where was the mercy of Allah when the daughter of Rasulullah was in her house and behind the door as the mal'oon came, that they said that they pushed the door in such a way that they said at that moment we heard the breaking of glass. Someone went to Amir al-Mu'mineen and they said, is this true, this narration, that at that time the sound that was heard was the breaking of glass? Ya Amir al-Mu'mineen, what was that sound? Amir al-Mu'mineen with tears in his eyes replied, remember Fatima was Hawra Insiya, that she was that angelic form in human body, that her ribs were not like the ribs of a normal person. The sound of her ribs breaking behind the pressure of the door was such that you heard it as if it was the breaking of glass. That was the sound of Zahra behind the door. That night alone was difficult if we would have said the affair was settled by the door, but no, that Amir al-Mu'mineen, when he comes to save Sayyidah Zahra, he pushes the mal'oon and he says, had Rasulullah not commanded me to be patient, I would have taken my revenge for what you have done to Zahra. They said, we took Ali ibn Abi Talib and we dragged him in the streets by his neck. Why? They said, we know Ali will be patient, so take him in the worst of conditions through and bring him to the market, bring him to the masjid to give bay'ah. They said they put the rope around the neck of Ali ibn Abi Talib and they dragged him through the streets. In this Sayyidah Zahra, who had just lost her son Muhsin, they said that Sayyidah Zahra went after Amir al-Mu'mineen. When she goes into the streets and says, let Ali go, Umar Mal'oon sends one named Kunfud. And they say that Kunfud in this moment began to beat Sayyidah Zahra. In history, in Tariq, there's a narration that when the second Khalifa cut the salaries of all of the Sahaba of Medina, he did not cut the salary of Kunfud. One came to Imam Ali and said, Ya Ali, he cut all of our salaries except this Kunfud. Why not Kunfud? Amir al-Mu'mineen, again with tears in his eyes, he says, this Kunfud was the one who beat Zahra. He hit her with the whip so hard that when I buried her, the discoloration was still on her arm from those strikes. By the right that he committed such an atrocity against the daughter of Rasulullah, his salary was not cut. They said Sayyidah Zahra was abused in the street of Medina such that she began to say, I don't ask you to leave Ali. Stop beating me in the streets of my father's city. They say when Amir al-Mu'mineen Sayyidah Zahra came to the darbar, she came to the masjid and she raised her hands and she said, if you don't release Ali in this moment, I will pray against all of you. They said in that moment when she raised her hands, we saw the walls of the houses of Medina raised to such a height that a camel could have walked under them. Out of fear of the anger of Sayyidah Zahra, we let Ali go. We did not ask of anything of him. Amir al-Mu'mineen narrates, as we walked back to the house, Hassan had come out to see what had happened. As I walked back with Hassan, my son, I saw him weeping. I said, Ya Bunayya, why do you cry? Imam Hassan says, Mama, if you had seen what I saw, you would weep too. Amir al-Mu'mineen says, son, what did you see? What did you witness? He says, Mama, when mother was coming, they struck her so hard in her face that they struck her in her eye. Amir al-Mu'mineen says, such Zahra would not look me in the eye because even her eye was injured. I tell you, when Zahra says, Subbat alayya al-masa'ib, that difficulties were poured upon me, these weren't the worst of the difficulties. Sayyidah Zahra says, Baba, when she goes to the grave of her father, they say when Zahra would go to the grave of Rasulullah, she would let out one sigh, and the entire masjid would begin to weep. She says, Baba, the worst difficulty is they called me a liar. They took my right away from me and they said I was a liar. Baba, I am your daughter. I am known as Siddiqat al-Kubra. These are the nights of crying. Let us weep for the children of Zahra. Remember, Imam Jawad, when he was a child of 6 years, he began to weep 5 years. He began to weep so bitterly in front of his father. Imam Radha says, I saw my son beat the ground and cry. I said, oh Muhammad, what has made you cry? He says, I remember the abuse of my mother Zahra. Baba, how could they hurt my mother Zahra like they did? Baba, if I could, I would remove them from their graves and burn their bodies. How could they hurt my mother Zahra? Imam Sadiq, they narrate, his body would be overcome with heat in such a way that they said we would see his body burning in fever, and he would take buckets of water to pour over his head and he would cry out, Ya Zahra, that he would become so angry at the abuse of his mother Zahra that his body would physically burn. These were the difficulties of Sayyidah Zahra, such that they would not even let her cry in the city. When they say, tell Fatima she can either weep in the day or she can weep in the night, but she can't weep day and night. Understand something, the weeping of Zahra was not something normal. The weeping of Zahra was the sound of Hawra Insiya. That her purity, that when she cried in true anguish and in pain. That the people could not stand to hear the sound of Sayyidah Zahra cry because it would affect them, because she was an angelic personality in reality. Such that they said, oh Ali, let her cry in the day or let her cry at night. So Amir al-Mu'mineen went and built Baytul Ahzan, the house of sorrows. Every morning Amir al-Mu'mineen would take Sayyidah Zahra, Imam Hassan, Imam Hussain and the children, and take them out of the city past Jannatul Baqi, so Zahra could cry there in peace, so that the people would not be disturbed. There was a tree in whose shade this house of sorrows was built. One day Amir al-Mu'mineen says, I went to go get Zahra. I saw Hassan and Hussain. Their faces had become red from the heat. I went to see Zahra. She was sitting under the sun crying, Ali, look, I used to take shade under this tree. They could not stand my crying. They even cut the tree in which I used to cry. Don't these people have any mercy for me? I will leave them soon. Why don't they let me cry? Ajrakum min Allah. The time came when Sayyidah Zahra was ready to leave this world. Asma bint Umais was in the house. Sayyidah Zahra had spent the last day taking care of the children, taking care of all of the affairs. Amir al-Mu'mineen came and said, oh Zahra, you are ill, you are injured. Why do you do all of these tasks? She says, I saw my father in a dream. My time here is almost complete. I want to leave my children in a condition of happiness. I want to take care of these affairs that they are pleased when I leave this world. Asma bint Umais says that Sayyidah Zahra said to me, I am going to go into my room. I am going to say my prayers. Asma, when you hear my prayers finish, when you don't hear my sound anymore, know that I have returned to my Lord. Asma says, after a time, I could no longer hear the dhikr and the hamd and the thana of my mistress. I went to look and I found that she had left this world. When I came back, the children Hassan and Hussain came to the house. I said to them, children, come and sit and eat. They said, Asma, have you ever known for us to eat without our mother Zahra? We can't eat until our mother comes and eats with us. Asma says, children, your mother is resting. Let her rest for a time. They said, Asma, we are the coolness of the eyes of our mother, that our mother will be rested when she sees us. Asma says, I could not argue with the children anymore. I sent them into the room. Hassan came from one side, Hussain came from the other. Hassan said, Mother, it is your son Hassan. Hussain said, Mama, it is your beloved Hussain. Why don't you answer me? Hassan lifted the cloth from the face of his mother. He turned and he said, Hussain, my condolences to you. Today we have been orphaned. Asma says the children ran from the house. They went to Masjid al-Nabawi. They went to Amir al-Mu'mineen. They said, Baba, our mother Zahra has left us today. The Mu'arrikheen, they write, we saw Ali stand up in the masjid. Then we saw him sit down. Then we saw him stand up. Again he sat down. They said, Ali, what happened to you? He says, Zahra has left me. I don't know if I should stand or if I should sit. I don't know what to do with myself anymore. ألا لعنة الله على القوم الظالمين وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون. يا الله بحق فاطمة وأبيها وبعلها وبنيها وسر المستودع فيها. Oh Allah, by the right of these tears, hasten the reappearance of Imam Zaman. The ulama, they write, they said in that moment when Fatima was pushed between the door and the wall, she called out, oh my son Mahdi, look at how they abuse your mother. Why don't you come to extract justice for us by the right of these tears? Oh Allah, hasten Sahibul Zaman. Make us from the upright supporters and make our lineage from the supporters of Imam Zaman. Oh Allah, there are those amongst our community, our family and the mu'mineen who are sick. By the mention of Sayyidah Zahra, give them all shifa. Oh Allah, there are those with difficulties. By the mention of this majlis and the mention of this personality, give them shifa. Matim Hussain.